start.
Until we're ready.
Good afternoon. We are here for a scheduled briefing, a mayor's briefing. It's following a council meeting that was held on Tuesday. At that council meeting, I have an agenda that we published for my own briefings. From time to time, point out and say that these briefings are not council meetings, but we notice them in the same way and typically hold them in the same way. I think we're having some technical difficulties with the equipment, so we are broadcasting through our partners at Kinetics. Thank you very much. And we'll be broadcasting, I think, to a YouTube channel that we have. But this will still be able, this is live, but we'll still be able to then take their product and download it on our transparency tab or however we normally do it on the city website. So where normally a council meeting and my briefings are, they'll place it there so it can be viewed in the future. After some consultation, we had a pretty lengthy discussion Tuesday night about what villages are. I think it's pretty clear that the issue of that being characterized as a new tax and all that surrounded that was just absolutely abysmally inappropriate, misleading information by the folks that created that. So I'm not going to belabor it, guys. There's no reason to. I made a post on my personal Facebook page. I don't normally direct people to that, but you can go to my Jacques Roy page and you'll see the formal post I made in the comments there under, and you can get a gist of how untrue that was. There'll be more to say about those kinds of things. I would note that I think of, other than the police jury, almost every jurisdiction from the school board to the city of Pineville to Woodward to, I can't say Woodward, to Ball and others all rolled forward. No stories were done. I would just ask people to consider why that is and why that continues to be the case of so much negativity about one jurisdiction. When this jurisdiction and its success defines so much of this region. And we have rather gingerly talked about in the past how we need to be on the same page and team to move this forward. And perhaps maybe we need to be less ginger in the future and be a little more robust in how we characterize that. There's so much good stuff happening in Pineville and in Alexandria and in this region, and we need to be about that business instead of tearing ourselves down and then complaining and saying we want people to come and live here and be here. It makes so little sense. It pains me to even say it because it's so self-evident. And but more on that later. So I won't go into that. Anybody can go look at that and see what it's about in a rather happy twist on sometimes what I say about social media, Ms. Belter, as you know, and how much it can get things wrong. That post went viral the other way about how people get things right and they're making the comments. So you don't have to listen to me, go look at what they're saying about the characterization made of what actions took place here, which were absolutely responsible actions by this council, and absolutely appropriate things to do, that you do pro forma in regular course every year, each year. I asked the clerk, who is a close colleague and a professional, I won't say her name because she's not used to being out in the public, although she sits here every meeting in the public. And we both sort of laughed earlier today about how normal that thing is, and this is the first time they turned into that. I'll leave it with its election season. Public safety updates. So I see the chief is here. A note on transparency about that. I think July 30th, if not at that meeting, at a previous briefing of mine, I'll talk about your roll forward. So we also explained it beforehand there, and also had a public meeting and all that. We've also been doing a lot of series about public safety in the city. And I also would note, the coverage atrociously done is the building across the street, the Cap 1 building. And I'm going to talk about that, Mr. Ward, especially the article you sent me this morning, which was uncannily similar, if not identical, facts and circumstances and how the media handled it there versus here. It's not about punching back at our local media, guys. It's about getting information to the public that's correct on very serious issues and not having politicized media. That's not the role of media. Report, let people form opinions. If you have an opinion side to your media, call it that. This is opinion side. With regard to public safety, we are careful. We talk about at these briefings often that we go through a two-step process on any time a story breaks that's serious. So the event that happened at a sporting goods store, retail center the other day was serious. It's as serious as it gets. And if I were to unpack it all the way, at the end of that unpack, I think what I would tell you is it looks exactly like an event that could have turned into something totally different and much worse. There was a shot fired into a gun case. Because of the age of the individual, I am completely constrained in what I can say, which I 99.9% agree with, because that's the nature of how we protect kids. There's always a problem with the balance in that situation where more information would help people to understand things. So back to our two-part test. One, if a situation is dynamic, you say more, because you have to say more, because if the situation is unfolding in an active shooter situation, et cetera, to keep people safe, more needs to be said. In a situation where there's not a dynamic situation, means things are still unfolding, you have a situation that happens, it's over, the person has either been caught, the situation interdicted, in other words, over, then perhaps you say less while you conduct an investigation and make sure that you catch a suspect, keep people safe, et cetera. But that's our two-part test. We've gone over it quite a few times. That's not magic, or that's standard best practice anywhere. When a situation like that happens, so you can put domestic in one bucket, right? It's hard. Our officers can do the best job possible. They can't predict a domestic flare-up 99% of the time, maybe 99.9. You can't do that. If there is a situation as here where someone takes a vehicle, drives there, goes in and does that, hard to predict. And since it involves someone who's young, I can't say more, but if I were to unpack this, I think people would be worried about what's happening in our society and how we have school shootings and all of those things and how all of this relates. But I also think people would need to understand that you are not talking about, in this case, even a random situation of violence, and you are not talking about a planned situation where that was where a gang activity or something else occurred. It's not that either. There's a whole bunch of other factors that went into this situation that make it different than most. And you're also not talking about a situation where, because this happened, again, or to be able to unpack it all, it didn't involve a juvenile, you would quickly understand. It doesn't make that place a dangerous place every day or a bad area of town to the extent there's such things as that. So when people on social media, sometimes outside of Alexandria, sometimes our own, say, oh my God, that means you can't go to a store or do whatever, you're missing the boat about what occurred in this situation. Unfortunately, in this situation, as with what turned out to be an unfortunate, we believe and still maintain it was in fact determined to be a suicide at Ash sometime back. Unfortunately, the truth of what really occurred in many ways is worse than you can imagine. But it doesn't make the place a dangerous place to go in the future. It makes what families and all of us are going through in lives with family, friends, and people you know who struggle with lots of problems that families have. It makes that very sad and very serious. And it brings me back to what I left off with a few weeks back, which is see something, say something. See something, say something. And that's probably more than the chief would have wanted me to say about that. I think their concern is not holding information from you. It's that it involves a juvenile. So there are ways people can link names, do other things. I'm probably going a little bit outside of where they want me to be, and I'm willing to take that risk, not because I'm trying to harm a family, a kid, or anybody else, but because I want people to understand that you can't make giant assumptions about things because of what you see on Facebook. You can't make giant assumptions about things because of what someone told you they heard. And in some cases, while we may try to mitigate in your minds that there is this presented, present, and you shouldn't be in this area, which couldn't be further from the truth in this situation. At the same time, the truth of what happened here is worse than that, because it's an indictment on our society and the struggles we're having with our families. So, on our public safety, we're going to continue to unpack lots of things that are going well too. The response to that situation, Chief, was excellent. The ending of the story is still unfolding, unfortunately, and tough. But I just hope that everybody, if you're a person of faith, will say prayers for those people involved and families and everybody else, and understand that for any of our children out there, including kids that may be in trouble a lot, there still are the issues and root causes of that and underlying things that are happening that we need to do more about. There's no, this only happens in one family. I think that's my point. So I just want people to think about some things. We have on our website, under our transparency tab, some of those presentations we did last year. Here are some things that I would tell you after years of research, what scientists say to look for, what we are putting out with our own people. So we're going to talk a second about root cause, especially in kids and the crimes they do. Whether you see a kid who you may choose to use a word like thug or thuggery or whatever, or you see a kid that you think, how could this happen? That person was a straight A student and then went to a school and took shots. Whatever it is, there are some common root causes. And they start with a disconnection and an inability to do the self-soothing and the things that you all, I hope, had the fortunate benefit of in your families, or some aunt or some grandmother or somebody in your life that made it better. But that disconnection is that first root cause that leads to some problems. closely associated and in some ways the same is a disconnection of deep relationships, to family relationships. Doesn't take me to say or anyone in here to not know that the breakdown of families is perhaps the primary root cause, sentinel cause. People can take this wrong and think, oh, kids need to be tougher, people need to be tougher. There's room for that in the discussion, but what I mean is what we all have come to know as the type of bullying. So bullying is a giant one. Marginalizing a kid in school, leaving that child in only a position where in every way they're disconnected from everyone. So when I say see something, say something, that's what that's about. You gotta interdict though. You gotta get in that situation. You may lose a friend or a cousin or someone's mad at you. You may get cussed out, told mind your own business, but you might save someone's life. And in some cases, you might save a bunch of people's lives all at once. Bullying is not, I don't mean someone got pushed at recess one time. I understand there's a continuum of this. We all know what we mean when we say bullying today. Systematic breakdown of a child at an institution where that child should be protected by people in a trust relationship. That's my definition. Poor and bad external relations and influences. Well, if you go through the first three, then someone's going to fill that gap perhaps in that child's life. So they're either going to be totally isolated and alone and get there, or because of those the first two disconnections in bullying, they're going to look to someone else who's not a good influence to fill the gap of influence that children seek, because they seek influence, they seek modeling, they seek to look at what someone else is doing. So you can either have that position of trust one way or another. So that's another. These next three are a little more just sort of hard hitting and basic. They can be the child's biology, or they can be environmental factors, but necessitous circumstances in addiction, right? It can be just that. Poverty, getting introduced to drugs by one of these trust relationships. Those become almost more physical, right? Anger management, lack of self-control, again, could be born with a disposition of that, or a disability, or a mental health problem with her, or it could be something environmentally caused. And then the last one, which I guess would be the most controversial because of what it means, but I guess if you said covetousness, the Bible would use this word and the Ten Commandments, but unreasonable desires. The desire to have something that a kid doesn't have, and the inability to understand how you're supposed to go about getting it. So those root causes are drivers. The other things I think are obvious to all of us. We know that poverty is a huge part of this, and we know that the lack of education is the greatest fertile ground for these things to go awry, while at the same time, it's at the school where some of the bullying and other breakdowns occur. See something, say something. The things that we're doing that are preventive, prophylactic, whatever you want to call it, things that aren't just those guys, Stephen, your guys going out and solving crime fast, which you're doing. So what are we doing to stop it from happening? This event that just occurred at a sporting goods store, etc. We need to continue to fix lots of things here. And you're going to see we have, and I'm talking about little things now too, litter abatement, all the things that make a society break down, make us not have pride, make us talk bad about our own area. We have been and will get continually more aggressive about it. So Mr. Gill at Public Works, we are starting a 6 to 7 person team that does litter abatement when it's called. Like this specific problem, go deal with it. But we have a massive unpack coming to you guys in the council of multiple things in what we would call community service style community policing to augment what our police and that gap can't do. I think you're going to see that we promised you in the 100-day plan a plan, and we published it, and you're about to see the continued implementation of it. All the way to supporting and helping people with better eating habits, physical activity in the city, more programming in the places that we have. We have a lot. We're going to get back on something I left last time really involved with and spoke on a lot, which is crime prevention through environmental design, SEPTED principles, lighting, all those things that make communities better. We are going to insist on our certified safe Alex neighborhood groups sticking with what it required them to get certified for. And if your neighborhood group is formed for political purposes, you're probably not going to like how safe Alex will treat that, because that's not what neighborhood groups are for. I understand the season, so we relax a little bit because we know everybody is all of a sudden who wasn't in your neighborhood group is all of a sudden there every week concerned, and then they go away right after the season. The elections are over. But neighborhood groups that are certified to work with safe Alex, we're gonna stick to that. The amount of work on dilapidated neighborhoods, et cetera, is massive. I didn't understand or see all of what was said and how it arose, Lee, but I did hear some comments that you had made. I heard some comments from Roosevelt Johnson, and I did take some solace in your explanation of some differences. So while Roosevelt is sort of our ambassador on this, I would have disagreed in making comparisons that are not proper comparisons, and I thought that you handled that correctly. The challenges Alexandria faces are very different, and that's the urbanized area and the area where lots of people from all over drive through and drop trash. Thank you very much. We have a lot more challenges with it, and it is much more costly and harder to abate. But we are, in fact, doing that. And while people may snicker and say, well, I see trash everywhere, we not only take it seriously, and we're not only being recognized for how seriously we're taking it since coming back, but I think people maybe would be happy to know that I personally, it's become pet peeve would not be giving justice how I feel about it. And there can be good things, like there can be programs where people give food out, and every person who gets their box of food will leave a trail of those boxes across our city in an exact line that I can go draw and show you, all the way to long-term living hotel, motel places that are allowing trash. No more. Something's going to be done about it. And all of us who play in this area of homelessness and litter abatement and where those roads join are going to have to work together. It ain't going to be the mayor with the heavy hand it is going to be the mayor pushing very hard that while the appreciation of what you do to help people with horrible acts of mercy is critical, it can't lead to a new problem too. We need to better use our resources to help you achieve your horrible act of mercy, which we all believe in. But it can't lead to new problems, which, guys, is a vicious circle that continues to tear the city down. I can drive over by some long-term living spaces, and while I won't be specific, I'm talking about right next to Raising Cane's. Just no more. We're going to do something about that. We're going to visit. We already have, and there's an area right there on Jackson Street where we have people who are giving their lives to help homelessness, but it turned into Styrofoam Alley. And I drove by today and was pleasantly surprised and pleased, and I know that Chad has been making visits personally. And listen, this ruffles feathers, and some of our partners aren't happy about it. But doing nothing about it was causing nothing to be done about it. And so we'll be there. See Mr. Villard here, who volunteers at Manor House, I know. And obviously what Manor House does is not only critical, but is the perfect example of a horrible act of mercy. But if every box that comes out of there is on the ground, we got a new problem. And so
they did one thing, they quit giving box of pieces to those on the ground anymore.
It's one step.
One step. I mean, it just takes a few steps at a time.
Yeah. These are tough because somebody can record this and play it and say, look, the mayor's against corporal acts of mercy. I mean, if you want to do that, like I saw what happened at the city council on Tuesday, you can continue to, but we're going to out you. We're going to out you. Nobody could ever believe that we're not for the act of mercy. What we're for is, what do we need to do to fix the problem, right? Listen, Some of this is post-COVID, some of this is just societal breakdown stuff like I was talking about earlier on these root causes, but it's not okay. If you have a filthy city and a place that doesn't look good, it will cause people's mindset about that to break down in every way. If things are clean and well kept, just like your home, like the garden you care about, your front porch, it will also cause the opposite, a better feeling about it. So, more partnering, more honest talks about it. You know, you can't always just be sort of mealy-mouthed about it. You got to call it and say, this is what's happening where, and this is what we need to do. None of that means that you don't appreciate what people are doing, as you know, because we do. I continue to think Manor House is the simplest exercise of the act of feeding the hungry with no rules, you don't have to sign anything, you can go do it. If someone who makes $1 million a year wants to go to Manor House and get a meal, they can. If that's what you choose to do, shame on you, but you can. And so I just think that's a simple principle. It doesn't take a lot of thought from us. I don't have to figure out how to write cooperative endeavors on it because you're taking care of business. But the trash that was being created in the park right next to it in that area, that also has to be fixed. And even folks who need help, they may be dual diagnosed with drug addiction, mental health problems and all, everyone knows not to throw their trash on the ground. And just add more trash receptacles that won't be used, because I've heard that one over and over, that won't cut it either. We've tried that, we've been down that road. You just have a bunch more receptacles that are not full of the trash that's on the ground right next to it. And so some of that's behavior modification that we need to gently, caringly do, but it needs to be done. But we as the leaders who do it also have to think through, how will I make this program work and more minimize that? You've already done one step, and there'll be more to do. We'll do them together. The city will do its part. Financially in some cases, but manpower with our folks. And when you see us outline, Tanya, the community service officers that are coming that I alluded to earlier, to augment community police and get that back, I think you're going to be very pleased with what you see. So they're non-commissioned officers, but they will work well. I'll let that try out when it does the proper way. Won't get ahead. Okay. With regard to GATA, I keep it on my agenda every week. And on my agenda every week are 4 items. The purpose of GATA is Alexandria development to aid the entire region. Alexandria development, but for the whole region. Economic development is a professional skill. That's not an insult to anybody involved. It is to remind us it is a professional skill. To the extent that people are fighting and scrapping and calling each other names and unable to hold a proper meeting and doing all that, no judgment on who, what. I'm not talking about individuals. I would just say that's not a professional skill. That's an unprofessional exercise of what should be skill-based. And it needs to stop. For months now, I've just asked to be asked to go and speak to GATA, because I feel like you're the appointing authority, Mr. Rubin, Ms. Perry, Mr. Villard, Ms. Felter. You're the appointing authority. The mayor is not an appointing authority, GATA, and the mayor is not seeking to be. The mayor doesn't want to take it over. The mayor doesn't want to appoint people or have anything to do with employment over there. What I want is to have a partner that the legislation says that they're for as an organization to do big projects of need. And what I would suggest that the legislation says, because I know it says it, because I read it all the time, is that those things should be primarily first in the area of true economic development. That is the importation of new dollars that create wealth in our community, meaning they're a dollar that didn't exist before. If a fast food restaurant is located in one area and moves to another area, that is not necessarily economic development, because it's not the creation of a new dollar. Same employees would theoretically transfer. It's community development if it's nicer and better and makes use of space. It's good. Retail is great, but importing new dollars that weren't here before, that's what GATA is for. It doesn't mean there's not a bunch of things for community development. There are. We have all kinds of organizations for that, and they're robust, and we want to make them better. But GATA's purpose, first, is economic development, and that has a definition. Its definition does not include primarily a grant maker or grant provider or whatever. I'm for that, before I'm misquoted. I'm for that, but you do have to decide what percent is that, what percent goes to what is supposed to be primary economic development, including and up to GATA bonding out part of its increment of money that goes into it for large scale projects, because that's what it was for. You can ask Myron Lawson or anybody else what it was for, who was there. They're going to tell you that. That's the new legal battle, by the way, is that you can take GATA down, Mr. Rubin, because it never bonded the first dollar out, and therefore its purpose has expired. And in that vein, I've twice now asked that the council not allow that. Whether that legalism is a problem, it is. It is not a solution in and of itself. And so I have asked, and the council obliged, that legislation be put on to simply reaffirm GATA and give us an extension while we work through it. There are some people who disagree with me on it. They want it to die. I can't help you there. I understand what I understand about why it's needed. I can't understand it for anyone else. But to let that increment go away would be catastrophic, and in a word I don't like to use often, especially in front of a school teacher, it would be dumb. So you get that off your backs, so then it can be dealt with. GATA also has a part in community development, the grant side. Where that balance is up to, I think, the appointing authority to provide some guidance. This idea that the commissioners are so independent, they don't have to care what you say. I don't know where that started, but it just started, because it's just in this cycle of members of GATA who broke GATA, who made the system fail by fighting and not listening to the appointing authority. My criticism of the appointing authority, you guys, I've said, that you're not exercising your appointing authority. Mr. Goins, the city attorney, sat up here and said, you're the parents and they're the children. I winced that day, like, oh my God, that's a little strong the way he said it. I'm not so sure he wasn't wrong on his metaphor that day, the more that we watch this unfold. And I think that some of you feel the same way, whether you want to say it openly or not. But it's got to get fixed, and something good has to happen at this point. It's been enough of the fight. Let's move on. So 2 members have asked. I tried to make sure that I was getting some asked by everybody, but I now have the majority of the council asking me to personally intervene. Now my staff, as of their vote yesterday, which was about 99% to intervene and 1% not to, and that's just to be protecting me from what I'm about to go walk into. And I know I've been in this a while. I know what it's going to be. I'll get a lot of hits for getting involved, and there'll be people say, "See, he was always behind X or Y." I'm not. It doesn't matter. I have a job, and my job is to advise and assist you guys, and it is to, on your behalf, go and do this. So I'm going to ask to be placed on the agenda at an appropriate meeting in the immediate future, and I'm going to go there and talk about the River Act and the projects that we need their help with, and hopefully that will not devolve, but evolve into some positive conversation. So I'm just telling you, I'm going to go try to talk to you. And I've asked that any individual commissioner who wants to talk to me, I'll sit down and talk, and 2 or 3 have asked to, and others may not. I'll talk to anybody, but I was not taking those meetings one-on-one to avoid the allegation I'm intervening or interfering. So I'm just telling you up front, transparency, I'm going to intervene and I'm going to interfere. As of today, I'm going to take those meetings. You're welcome. For those who voted that way. For the guy who didn't, who I won't name, sorry. Public assets, again, in transparency to you, I've Don't know how these stories get negative, Jim, and somehow it's the city's fault that a business closed and quit paying its utility bill. I don't know how the mayor calls that or you guys did. I don't know. But in Shreveport, the exact same thing happened. And Jim sent me this article today, and it's the craziest thing. I'm not going to sit here and talk Shreveport that it's going through, but Anthony McCauley, the staff writer there, wrote an article, headline, Shreveport's largest office tower falters. And without reading the whole article, it's the 25-story Regions Tower, it's the city's largest office tower, not paying utility bills. They're having to deal with the tenants in the building. How is it fair to them if their businesses are affected because the whole building doesn't pay a bill depending on how they're bundled? Some of those aren't individual, there aren't individual accounts, guys. So you get people on the, the Facebook professionals who know everything because they heard something of comparing cutoffs at the building, which were immediate, by the way, much more than either, to their residential home cutoffs. What an incomparable thing to do. So you have innocent tenants who do pay their bills into a full triple lease or whatever they have, and the owner takes the money, doesn't pay taxes, doesn't do what's right. So of the residents that are making these, by the way, this is mostly fake people in politics that are posting this. I hope y'all know that. Some of them aren't even real accountants. They're the same person, have 4 different names. We have intel on some of this, but what are you going to do? So, but the point is, that's not a real issue. The real issue, and I called Miss Perry the day I learned about it because it's in her district and gave her a private briefing about, look, this poses a problem is the declimatization of that big building and all that can lead to. And so I had a whole briefing about it, what happened in New Orleans and all of that. So we've been out front and transparent from day one. I don't know how the media turns that into a story that somehow it's our fault that someone didn't pay the bills. Half the business community says, how did it even get to that? Well, I think we're probably two-month cycle maybe they got to that. It's a big building, so you can get to a big number quick. Come on, guys. It's just basic math. The real issue is, what did you do and how should the city have reacted toward the tenants in the building who are innocent? Should their businesses and their kids who go to school and they have to pay bills for, suffer? But we didn't let it go. We met with them immediately. The bigger problem is the person owning the building is not taking care of his or her business. And that there is some history to this and what looks to me now, with what I've seen, that perhaps there was knowledge about it. And that brings it into something different. So my question was, what should we do? Should the city intervene? And I will tell you now, I'm looking into whether the city does have a cause of action or a right of action or anything that it should be doing. Because I learned the hard way once what can happen when someone holds a building hostage, which was prior to Mr. Mike Jenkins, who was a city hero, and what he did at the Bentley. There was a different person there before. That person has their own story. You all know it. You look it up about how they treat their assets in buildings. I'm not saying this owner is going to be the same way, but as I said at the last briefing, it doesn't look good so far. It doesn't look like there's a care about it. And so we are looking into whatever we can do to aggressively protect the building. For me, it's tough. We've got a under deal situation at Weiss's we're trying to do. So right in the middle of that, where you've got options happening, and after Mr. Jenkins, who had made a real push to do housing downtown occurred, you've now got another building where it's easy to say on Facebook, boy, it'd be nice to see housing in the building. We'll come forward and invest in housing in the building. That's not the city that will do that, but the city can help. So we're going to be aggressive about the building, but guys, to go around and say this is unique to Alexandria, and so everyone needs to leave the city that you grew up in and love and, are still living in, that doesn't help either. Shreveport's going through it. Lots of cities are going through, and this guy who writes, I guess, seriously in his articles, there's even a name for what this is called in large buildings that are happening in cities and the inability to keep people in them and fund them at the same level and pay for all those things. He talks a lot about as a nationwide problem. So it's not a surprise that we might see something like that either. But there's a reuse there, and there's a model that will work, and we're going to help in any way we can the private sector find a way to make that work. Questions on that? It's on, that's open for questions. I just noticed it today. Is there anybody on the council that wants us just stay out of it, let whatever happen happens? That would become a dumb thing to say. I can't believe I said dumb twice. I'm sorry, Ms. Glenn, I'll tell you that.
Okay.
Would not be a smart thing. So those assets that are big assets down here, obviously downtown's not the only place in the city that we need to be focused on. We have our Sally's building over there on the corner, and we do know things are happening in these areas. We have an incubator building where some things are happening. There are these big, large buildings all over the city that, in most cases, are occupied now. But I have to think about, because I talk to these business owners, the challenges they have in maintaining these large spaces. And that brings me to some closing on this about resilience and how Alexandria can be a future city. It can be about resilience and making these places work better. So we'll be unpacking that with our plans about CSOs and other things coming up, community service officers. I'll end on Gata again, and just the idea that we really need to get that partnership going right for us. If you can imagine, whether it's that building, Weiss's, or anything else, how much that's needed. I don't know the exact numbers. I'm assuming the last time I studied it, last time in office, that it's not too far off. 900,000 a year, is that what the increment produces? Is that close? Somewhere in there? Maybe in a low year, 750, in a high year, almost $1 million, but about 900,000 a year, we'll call it. So let's just say $1 million to use something that's easy. The way that increment works is through staying in the hotels and motels of this area. A piece of the taxes charged does two things. Half of it goes to Gata if it's in the city, when you stay in the city, hotel or motel, and the other half goes to the CBD. Okay? And so the increment, as we call it, some of you may know what a TIF is, a tax increment financing district, et cetera. That increment that goes to Gata is what funds its operations and its ability to grant money and do the things that it does. So that's a fairly decent sized number. If you call it $1 million, I know it's less for a technocrat that wants it. I think it's 900,000 or even lower than that sometimes. You want it to be higher, right? Because that means that the hotels and motels are doing well and producing. Part of that has been the idea that the more you put heads in beds, this was sort of Clifford's vision of it too, was that produces the increment, so it should be something you fund back into to help produce the increment. Nothing wrong with that. When I last had talked to Clifford, we made a list of things. I disclosed it in here from my contemporaneous notes in our meeting, and then whatever happened health-wise, and we evolved what our plans were. But in rough, Clifford wanted help getting Gata back into the community development portion of housing. In exchange, he was willing to help with Weiss's and other projects, and he wasn't a huge fan of Weiss's, I will tell you that. But he was willing in that trade with me on that project and some others, if I would help him re-stand up Gata's community development portion. It wouldn't be fair to share all of his thoughts about the grantsman side. I would just tell you that, it's a tough deal, right? Everybody wants money. Everybody comes for a grant. Everybody's got a worthy project. It's hard to decide. You got to weigh them against other people who want the same thing. But those are the things that we talked about. And the other big one was for the mayor, me, and the staff to come in and resolve that U-Court issue on the lease and the deal out at England. And I agreed to all of it. And so I'm going to also, if in the meeting the opportunity presents itself in talking about Weiss's and the help we need, I will also go into that with any members. I'll say up front, I'm going to go in there and give all respect to every commissioner there, and walk through the agenda, and in keeping with having thick skin, you never know how those things go. I can take a little, but what I won't do is go to a meeting where people are not running the meeting as a public meeting should be run. And certainly not where people talk to me or anyone on my staff who will be accompanying me inappropriately, but I can't imagine that would happen, because I think people have had enough and everybody's ready to sit down and talk. We're just there to say what we would like to see, and if corrected and said, look, that's great, but we'd really like to see you do this, we're ready, willing, and open. And that's $2 million a year that are generated, that the hotels and motels are producing. So Skip, where's Dr. He might have walked out. So Dr. Fox stepped out. But, every time he's filling Johnny Downs and families are coming in and staying, they're producing what goes to David. This is a circle of economic development that we need to keep healthy. The cycle has to be healthy. And that's how I'm going to approach that meeting. And I will welcome any council persons who want to go. I'll give you a heads up of when. And maybe we can all go and share it and have a calm, cool meeting about what we can do together. Last point to make on this, look, we can spend all of our time on the percent of things we disagree. We can figure out if there's only 10% of things that everyone in that room agrees on, let's spend 9% of the time on that and just get that part knocked out and go ahead and do it. All right, I'll answer any questions, closing out. Anything?
Is anything definitive happening at Weiss's?
Yes. So Weiss's has been under an MOU. I think the MOU is technically expired, but it doesn't matter because it's the only one that was responded to. We didn't care about the expiration. An MOU is not a contract. It is an agreement that the parties say, if the council approves by ordinance the right of the mayor to sign up for cooperative endeavor, these would be the terms. We published all that. We're still under it. Everyone's working in good faith. I did one extension, and at some point you can keep extending it, but I would only extend it so the purpose of the MOU is during that period, we won't negotiate with someone else. It keeps them able to keep their deal locked. Once the expiration occurs, technically we could re-RFP, we'd be free to talk to anyone else who walks up. We know to be fair in business. If someone else walks up and says, I'll take their same deal while these guys are in good faith working on it, that isn't exactly fair. But it's not under a restriction right now. It is under the restriction of good faith dealing that business people, including the elected person, should do if you're being honorable. We have always tried to push it being local. These guys aren't local. They also have told Mr. Johnson, our planning director, that if we continue to get there and make that deal occur, I think they're interested in other buildings that might be at play. That would be good for us. But the most important thing for the council to remember is we were donated the building, so you got it free. It was a public safety hazard when it was there before the donation. We took the donation to publicly fix what was going to continue to be a hazard and be the no business downtown to everybody else who wanted to do business. Good decision. Just like the hotel that paid off and just got re-signed 10 years outside their deal, completed everything as promised. So you get the building free. At that point, we would put in money to black box the building, meaning get it ready for future development for anybody. We would now make that an asset of the city to offer to the world to develop. Again, not a misuse of taxpayer dollars, a minimal amount since we were given the property and everything else. And we would get that back in the deal we create. We would get all of that back. And so the real trick is not spending $1 more than you have to box it without building a quote bridge to nowhere. What does that mean? It means you can't overbuild the black box because you don't know what the developer exactly will need. If the deal fails, you still need to be able to offer it to anybody, and they may have a different set of uses. Does that make sense? So the black box should be as minimal as it can to literally stop the rain from getting in, stop it from falling apart, have it stubbed out to the minimum level for HVAC, electricity, roof, etc. We took asbestos out, whatever else was there. All of that has been remediated. Mr. Johnson, you have something to say?
I was just gonna say, Lee, just sitting there, it's the same people we've been working with. They were in 3 weeks ago with their team and their architect. They've met with our engineer, Pan American, and the contractor cleaning. They've been on the roof, to look at, we're gonna have to put a new roof on, but this is just takes a while to work a project like this. But it's the same people we're engaged with, and we're trying to make it.
It's about a $15 million project. In round numbers, what I would present to Gata is you come in over time at 175, the city will come in at 125 in black box and other items. That's about $3 million in round numbers that we've already budgeted and it left in the budget 80 cents. It's been a long time, but if you come in at that at 15, then it meets what is my normal ratio of public to private partnering. We want to be in the 25% world, something like this, and have the private guys at the 75%. So someone critical could say, man, come do that for my business. I get that everybody would want help, but we're talking about a building that is in the middle of whatever we're going to do downtown that has to be done. I know I'll get beat up this time, and we always do, but we've already been through this battle. You've already made those findings in previous councils. The remediation of Weiss's and the idea of what we call a certificate of need, why it was important, all of that SWOT analysis, all of the experts and consultants, all of that was done years ago. So I'm not going to bore you with going back through it, but I will if the council asks me to. I will show you why and the public purpose and easily support that this is good. After all, you were criticized for what we did with the Holiday Inn. It turned out exactly great. Total private sector. There is no city part of that anymore. And we got our money back. And I suspect we will on this if it's done right. I appreciate Teddy Ray Price donating to the city. The other idea is you just do nothing and let it rock to the ground and have pieces fall off in the street. And that's not really a solution to anything. So if we keep it that percentage of investment in District 3, it's a smart investment. But just remember our lives in public life. Now you got a new problem. Yeah. And that's okay, because perhaps if this one gets solved, there's some promise about the new one that would work out, and it would be 100% private. So we're working toward that. Any other questions we have to answer? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate
3:30 tomorrow?
Say again?
3:30 tomorrow?
So tomorrow I set up Weiss's to talk about in the Capital One building. I think I'm gonna declare that we've done it today, and that'll let you off on a Friday briefing that is probably unneeded. I was gonna unpack the deals exactly. Look at y'all smiling. Trying to be transparent here, and you don't want me coming back. And so tomorrow I was gonna go through the Weiss's deal, detail for detail, so there can be no doubt to the public what we're trying to do. I did at your budget already once, and I'm kind of half did it today, but all of those are documented. Anybody can see it. I did send to Miss Rhonda Reed that runs Syncor a copy of that today, who is a professional who teaches the courses in our state to certify you to be an economic developer. And I probably would ask the council to consider re-upping her long-standing contract she had with the city forever, which I think has lapsed, because I think we need a point person to help Mr. Johnson and his team go do this. The legal work's all done. It started while I was not mayor.
Today, and we're working forward on that.
All the legal pieces are in place to present a cooperative endeavor to you and justify the public purpose and all that. But you still need it would be helpful to have somebody run for it. If there's a new market tax credit component, it is so complicated. If I put it on a board, it's correct. It's the worst in the building. So I will bring that to y'all for your consideration. I think that we need to think about having some expertise. Just go carry the daily ball. We've done everything we can do. We're ready to go. It would be mixed use, housing, market-based, and some retail on the bottom. So look, I keep saying we're here. You need to know these three things. This is the assumption. The assumption is you're not going to move downtown to the next level without housing. I can back that up with a study from RKG and 15 years of work. So just if you take me at my word that there's science behind this, the first assumption is housing is needed for this to take the next step. The second assumption, where there's a little disagreement, O'Day and others may disagree. The second assumption is that first housing should be as close to market-based as possible, with the least amount of public money subsidized, so that the market is bearing itself. That's assumption number 2. Okay, only one more, guys. Assumption number 3, now. Not 10 years, not now. And it goes with the other 2. So if you take those 3 assumptions, which it's taken us a lot of work, I'm saying it like it's a fact or something that just is popping, it's not. It's years of work. If you take those 3 assumptions and you accept those, and I can back that up with the data to show you should accept them, then Mr. Johnson carries this project till it dies. And even though we're out of the quote unquote lockout period of an MOU, I guess at some point it would be fair to ask other people in the public to look. But it isn't fully fair to ask them to look at someone else's deal while they're still trying to do it and let them steal it because they're willing to. That's a y'all problem. If someone comes and takes that lectern and says, I'll do it tomorrow, that's a you problem. Congratulations. That'll be a good fight to be in. It's like the commercial with the banks fighting for your business. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.